The room is full of noise. People clapping, shaking hands, smiling at each other like they've just won something. My brother Kyle is at the head of the long table, pen in hand, signing the final document. The document that ends everything we built together. I'm standing near the back wall. No one looks at me. No one passes me a pen. No one even nods in my direction. It takes me a few seconds to fully understand what I'm watching. Kyle slides the papers across the table to the buyers. 30 years of work, gone in a single stroke of his signature. Our company, the one we started in a rented office with 2 laptops and 1 shared Wi-Fi password, has just been liquidated. And my name is nowhere on those papers. Our company lawyer, a stiff man named Brent, clears his throat. Legal says your role was non-essential, Dan. Kyle doesn't even look at me when Brent says it. He's already leaning over to shake someone's hand. Non-essential. I stand completely still. My hands are shaking, but not from anger. I'm not angry yet. I'm realizing something. Something no one else in this room has thought about. Every single product license this company has ever issued still runs through me. Every single one. I walk out of the boardroom slowly. No dramatic exit. No slammed doors. Just me, walking down the hallway I've walked 1,000 times, past the server room I built from scratch, past the framed photo of Kyle and me at our first trade show. Behind me, I can still hear the laughter. Glasses clinking. Someone making a toast. My own employees don't look up as I pass their desks. I push through the front door and step into the parking lot. The afternoon air hits me like cold water. I sit in my car and grip the steering wheel. I don't cry. I don't scream. I just sit there and stare at my phone, waiting for Kyle to call me. He doesn't. An hour passes. Then 2. That's when the full weight of it settles over me. This wasn't a business decision made in a rush. This wasn't a mistake. Kyle didn't forget to include me. He chose not to. He planned it. Quietly. Carefully. While I was still showing up every single day and doing my job, he was building a future that had no place for me in it. 30 years. Gone in 10 minutes. And my brother didn't even have the courage to look me in the eye. My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 56 years old. I have spent more than half my life building a software company called Hayes Logic alongside my younger brother, Kyle. I wrote the first line of code. I designed the core systems. I built the licensing architecture that every single product we ever sold depends on. Without it, nothing works. No activations. No renewals. No license keys. Nothing runs. Kyle knew how to talk to people. He wore the right clothes, said the right things, shook the right hands. He was the face of Hayes Logic. The name in the press releases. The one who got featured in tech magazines. I was the one who made sure the lights stayed on. And now, at 56, I'm standing in a parking lot with an empty cardboard box because I wasn't allowed back inside to collect my things. And the company I poured my life into has been sold to people who don't fully understand what they've bought. But here's the thing. The one thing that keeps me from falling apart completely. Every product license in circulation, every single one, still runs through a system that I built. A system that is still connected to my name, my credentials, my control. And I haven't blocked a single thing. Not yet. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because this story doesn't start in that boardroom. It starts in a small apartment in Denver, 29 years ago. Kyle was 23. I was 27. We had no investors, no office, no team. Just a shared idea and enough stubbornness to keep going when everyone told us it wouldn't work. I handled the technical side. I'd been writing code since I was 14 years old. Kyle had the personality. He could walk into any room and make people believe in something before it even existed. We were a strong team in those early days. I built the core licensing system during those first 2 years. Every time a client bought one of our products, that license was generated through my system. Every renewal passed through it. Every activation code. Every expiry date. Every permission level. It was the backbone of the whole operation. Kyle used to joke about it at company events. He'd put his arm around my shoulder and say, "If Dan ever walks out, the whole thing dies overnight." People would laugh. It was a good line. Everyone thought he was being funny. I never laughed at that joke. Because I knew it wasn't one. I knew exactly what I had built. And I knew, even then, that one day that knowledge would matter. I just didn't know it would matter like this. For the first 15 years, Kyle and I worked well together. Not perfectly, we argued about plenty of things. But we respected each other. I stayed in my lane, he stayed in his. Then he married Natalie. Natalie was sharp and polished. She had strong opinions about everything: the company's image, the way meetings were run, who deserved a seat at the table. She came from a wealthy family and had grown up around boardrooms and business deals. She knew how to make people feel small without raising her voice. She didn't like that I had real control over the company without being visible, without being loud, without ever needing her approval. Investors get uncomfortable when they can't see who holds what, she told Kyle once. I wasn't meant to hear that. But sound travels in open offices. Slowly, things began to shift. I stopped being invited to certain meetings. Strategy meetings. Financial reviews. Partner calls. At first I told myself it was just oversight. Then it became a habit. Then it became something that was clearly intentional. Decisions started happening without me. I'd find out about them days later from junior staff who assumed I already knew. But I kept showing up. I kept doing my job. Because the system still needed me, even if the people running the company had started pretending otherwise. About 3 months before the liquidation, I started noticing things that didn't add up. Kyle began asking me unusual questions. Not technical ones. He never asked technical questions. These were questions about ownership. About what would happen to the licensing infrastructure if the company changed hands. About whether the system could be transferred to a new owner smoothly and quickly. I told him the truth. It couldn't be transferred without a complete rebuild from scratch. The architecture was too specific, too layered. It had been built using my own methods, my own logic, my own custom shortcuts developed over years. You couldn't hand it to a stranger and expect them to operate it. Kyle nodded slowly when I said that. He didn't ask any follow-up questions. He just smiled. Not a warm smile. A small, careful one. Like he was quietly crossing something off a list in his head. I drove home that night and sat at my desk for a long time, turning that smile over in my mind. 2 days later, without telling anyone, I pulled up the original company agreements we had both signed at the very start of Hayes Logic. The founding documents. The ownership terms. The intellectual property clauses buried at the back. I read through everything slowly. A cold feeling settled at the base of my neck. Something was coming. The document arrived on a Tuesday morning. An old colleague of mine, a man named Pete who had left our partnerships division 2 years earlier to join another firm, forwarded it with just a short message. Thought you should see this. Might mean nothing. It was a draft acquisition summary. The kind of document circulated between buyers and sellers before a deal becomes final. I opened it slowly. I scrolled through the company overview, the asset list, the valuation section. My name wasn't in it anywhere. Not once. But my system was. It appeared near the bottom of the technical assets section, described as a non-critical backend utility with standard licensing functionality. I read that line 3 times. Non-critical. Standard. These were people about to spend a significant amount of money on our company, and they had no real idea what they were actually buying. Someone had described the single most important piece of our entire operation as if it were a basic plugin you could swap out on a weekend afternoon. That was either a massive oversight, or it was deliberate misrepresentation. And sitting there at my desk, Pete's email still open on my screen. A clear and calm thought settled inside me like a stone dropping to the bottom of still water. They were selling something they didn't fully understand. I didn't call Kyle. I didn't send him an angry email. I didn't drive to his house and demand to know what was happening. I went quiet, and then I went to work. I spent the next 3 weeks carefully reviewing every contract I had ever personally signed in connection with Hayes Logic. Not the agreements Kyle had signed on behalf of the company, my contracts. The ones I had entered as a co-founder, as a developer, as the lead architect of our core infrastructure. I printed everything. I organized it all by date. I went through each document line by line, marking clauses, cross-referencing terms, flagging anything that touched on intellectual property ownership. Then I brought in a lawyer, a careful, experienced woman named Audrey who specialized in technology contracts. Not because I couldn't understand the documents myself. I could. But because I wanted a second set of eyes before I made a single move. I needed to be completely certain. It took 8 days. At the end of those 8 days, Audrey sat across from me at her small office table and said the words I had already suspected, but needed to hear plainly. The licensing infrastructure you built is yours, Daniel. Legally. The contracts support it. Ownership was never formally transferred to Hayes Logic. It has always been yours. I thanked her, drove home, made coffee, and started planning. The liquidation meeting was held on a Friday afternoon in early spring. I received a brief email 3 days before. Not a personal call, not a sit-down from Kyle, just a short message from his assistant telling me to attend. The room was full of people I recognized. Buyers, lawyers, brokers. Natalie sat near the front, dressed like she was attending something to celebrate. She caught my eye when I walked in and gave me a slow, practiced smile. "Dan," she said, "you'll land on your feet." Her voice was soft, almost kind, but her eyes said something entirely different. She wasn't offering comfort. She was telling me, without saying the words out loud, that I had already been removed. That the decision had been made a long time ago, and today was just the paperwork making it official. I didn't respond. I nodded once, found a chair near the back, and watched my brother sign away everything we had built together. He never looked at me. Not when he picked up the pen. Not when people clapped. Not when the handshakes started going around the table. I sat in that room completely still and felt something shift inside me. Not grief. Not rage. Something colder than both. Purpose. 2 weeks after the liquidation, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. It was an email from a client called Harlow Financial, one of our oldest accounts. They had been using Hayes Logic software for over 11 years. Their licensing manager had always dealt directly with me, even in the later years when Natalie had tried to push all client contact through Kyle's team instead. The email was short. "Hey Daniel, license renewals aren't processing on our end. Getting error codes across the board. Can you take a look when you get a moment? Thanks." I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the table. I sat with the silence for a while. A long while. I stared at the wall. I thought about Harlow Financial, about the first time I had set up their account, sitting in their IT office with a thermos of coffee balanced on my knee and a laptop open in front of me. 11 years ago. Eventually I picked up the phone and read the message a third time. I thought carefully about what to do. And then I did something I had never done in 29 years of working with clients. I put the phone back down. I didn't reply. That evening I opened my laptop and logged into the system. Everything was exactly as I had left it. My credentials still worked. My administrator access was fully active. Nobody had thought to remove it, or perhaps nobody knew how. The system had always been mine to manage. There were no handover documents because Kyle had never asked me to write any. There was no backup administrator because I had never trained one. The buyers had acquired a company without understanding that one of its most critical assets was still entirely in the hands of the man they had just pushed out the door. I scrolled through the active license records. Thousands of entries. Clients large and small. Renewals scheduled across the coming weeks. Activations waiting to be processed. Keys that needed to be issued. Nothing was broken. Everything was perfectly intact. But none of it would move without my authorization. Renewals would stall at the point of approval. Activations would return error codes. New keys would fail to generate. I had built those checkpoints into the system years ago as a security measure, requiring direct authorization from the lead administrator at each critical stage. It had always been a feature. Right now, it felt like something more. I closed the laptop slowly. I hadn't blocked anything. I hadn't changed a single setting. I had simply not opened the door. And behind it, things were already beginning to pile up. Within a month, the noise started. First, it was whispers. A few support tickets here, a client complaint there. The new company managing Hayes Logic's assets, a firm called Drayfield Acquisitions, was fielding calls they had no answers for. Their technical team was walking in circles, pulling at cables that led nowhere. Then it grew louder. Posts began appearing in the online forums where our clients talked to each other. Is anyone else getting activation errors? Our renewal failed. Anyone know what's happening? Called support 3 times. Nobody can tell me anything useful. Kyle must have seen them, because he posted a public update on his business profile. Confident wording. Smooth and controlled. Hayes Logic is undergoing a smooth transition. Minor system issues are being addressed by our technical partners. Thank you for your patience. I read it while eating lunch at my kitchen table. Minor system issues. I put my fork down. I almost laughed, not out of cruelty, but because of how completely he had misread the situation. He was still treating this like a slow server or a routine software bug. Something a junior developer could patch on a Tuesday afternoon. He still didn't understand what was actually happening. Or rather, what wasn't happening. Because I wasn't allowing it to happen. Kyle called me on a Thursday night. I was in my home office when my phone lit up with his name. I hadn't spoken to him since the parking lot, weeks after the liquidation, when he had walked straight past me without stopping. I answered on the fourth ring. Hey. His voice was casual. Easy, almost breezy. Like we talked every week. Quick thing, Dan. There's a system hiccup with the licensing side. Just need someone to look at it. Can you jump in and sort it out? A pause. Like you used to. I let the silence stretch. Long enough that I heard him shift on the other end. Kyle, I said. Yeah, I don't work there anymore. Another silence. Longer this time. Right, but, it's just a technical thing. Shouldn't take long. I don't work there anymore, I said again. Calm. Clear. Even. You made that very clear in the boardroom. I'm not employed by Hayes Logic. I have no legal obligation to provide support to Drayfield or anyone connected to that sale. Dan, take care of yourself, Kyle. I ended the call. I sat back in my chair and stayed there for a while without moving. For the first time in 30 years, I felt the full weight lift off my shoulders. Not all of it, but enough. 3 days after Kyle's call, a formal email arrived from Drayfield's legal team. It was written in the precise, pressing language that legal teams use when they expect the other side to back down quickly. They cited the acquisition agreement. They referenced the asset transfer documentation from the Hayes Logic sale. They used phrases like continuity of service obligations and technical handover responsibilities. They fully expected me to read it, feel the pressure, and log in to fix the problem. I forwarded it to Audrey without adding a single comment. She called me that evening, and I could hear quiet satisfaction underneath her professional tone. They have no legal basis, she said. The licensing system was never formally transferred to Hayes Logic as company-owned property. Under the original co-founder agreements, you built and retained it as a contractor. They acquired the company's assets, but they didn't acquire this because it was never the company's to sell. The following morning, I sent one document back to Drayfield's legal team. It was a clean 3-page summary prepared by Audrey. It outlined the ownership of the licensing infrastructure, identified the relevant contractual clauses, and closed with one clear statement. I had no legal obligation to provide access, support, or cooperation. Everything I was doing, or rather, not doing, was entirely within my rights. It was Pete who called me again. Same careful, measured voice. I thought you should know something, he said. I heard this from someone close to the original deal. Kyle didn't liquidate the company because he wanted to move on or chase a new opportunity. He liquidated it because he had to. I asked him to keep going. The numbers had been bad for almost 2 years, Daniel. Serious losses. A major client pulled out early last year and took a quarter of the annual revenue with them. He had been covering the gap quietly, borrowing against future income, delaying payments, moving money around. The liquidation wasn't strategy. It was an escape. He needed the sale to close before anyone examined the books too carefully. I sat with that for a long moment. It explained everything. The speed of the deal. The carelessness of the paperwork. The reason he hadn't negotiated fairly with the buyers. He needed cash fast, not a good outcome. He hadn't betrayed me out of ambition. He had betrayed me out of desperation. He was drowning, and instead of coming to me, instead of being honest with the one person who had been beside him for 30 years, he had quietly removed me and used the company sale as a lifeboat. He had left me standing on a deck he had already set fire to. And he hadn't said a word. By the second month, the cracks were impossible to ignore. 3 of Drayfield's largest inherited clients formally paused their contracts. Documented license failures were piling up. A technology trade publication ran a short piece. Hayes Logic transition raises questions among long-term clients. It wasn't front-page news. But in our industry, people in the right positions read those pieces very carefully. Kyle called me twice more during that period. I didn't pick up either time. The second call came late at night. He left a voicemail. His voice was different. The easy confidence was completely gone. He sounded tired in the way that people sound when they've been having very hard conversations for weeks and are starting to run out of options. Dan, I know things didn't go the way they should have. I know that. But this is getting serious now. Clients are threatening lawsuits. Drayfield is pushing back hard. I just need a little help stabilizing things. Just the licensing side. Just for now. We can talk about the rest later. I played it twice. I noticed he still hadn't said the word sorry. He didn't say he had been wrong to cut me out. He didn't say he should have handled things differently. He simply needed a problem solved. He still saw me as a resource he could access. He hadn't changed at all. Kyle called again on a Sunday afternoon, and this time I answered. He got to the point quickly. Things were worse than he had publicly admitted. Drayfield was threatening to reverse portions of the deal. Multiple long-term clients were demanding refunds. His legal fees were climbing far beyond what he had planned for. He had a number in mind. A significant one. More than my fair share of the original sale had ever been, and I had received nothing from that sale. He wanted a full handover, complete system transfer, documentation, a month of training for Drayfield's technical team, ongoing support. In return, a wire transfer within 48 hours. I listened to the entire offer without interrupting. Then I asked him one question. Kyle, why didn't you include me in the deal? Silence. A long, heavy silence. Not the kind where someone is searching for the right words. The kind where someone knows deep down that there are no right words. That the honest answer is the one thing they cannot bring themselves to say out loud. He gave me something vague. Legal complications. Timing pressures. Advice from his lawyers. A way of saying it wasn't personal without being able to look me in the eye when he said it. Every answer except the truthful one. The silence told me everything I needed to know. I thanked him politely. I didn't accept the offer. I spent 1 full week thinking before I made my next move. I didn't want to act from emotion. I had watched Kyle make rushed decisions driven by fear and desperation, and I had seen where that path led. I wanted to be the opposite of that. Deliberate. Measured. Certain of every step before I took it. I got out a notepad. I still prefer paper when I'm thinking through something important. And I wrote down every asset I legally controlled. The licensing architecture. The authentication layer. The core renewal engine. The API framework sitting underneath our 3 most widely used products. Then I wrote down the client names I knew best. The ones who had always dealt directly with me, even when Natalie tried to redirect everything through Kyle's team. The ones who had told me privately over the years that they trusted my judgment. Then I wrote down what I could actually offer them. Not a temporary patch while the existing structure collapsed. A proper solution. A new company with full legal ownership of the infrastructure they depended on. Clear contracts. Guaranteed continuity. Built right from the ground up, without shortcuts or hidden problems buried underneath the surface. I circled 3 names on that list. Harlow Financial. Brentwood Systems. Calco Group. Then I picked up the phone and started making calls. I met with all 3 clients separately over 2 weeks. I was completely straightforward with each of them. I explained the situation clearly and without exaggeration. I told them exactly what had happened with Hayes Logic, what I personally owned, what I could offer going forward, and what an agreement with me would actually mean for their operations. No sales pitch. No slideshow. Just facts, laid out simply, backed by documentation. All 3 signed with me. Harlow Financial signed first. Their IT manager shook my hand afterward and said something I didn't expect. Honestly, Daniel, we've always trusted your side of the operation. We're just relieved you're still in the picture. That sentence stayed with me for a long time. I had spent years being the invisible part of Hayes Logic. The part that didn't get invited to meetings or photographed at industry events. Kyle was the name people recognized. I was the name they called when something stopped working. But apparently being the person people called when something broke was worth more than I had ever let myself believe. My new company, I named it Hayes Core, had 3 signed contracts before it had a proper website or a business phone number. For the first time in 30 years, my name was on the front door. Not buried somewhere in the system files where no one ever looked. Everything began moving faster after that. Drayfield acquisitions had held their patience longer than I expected. But patience has a limit, and they had reached theirs completely. Their board commissioned an independent technical review of everything they had acquired through the Hayes Logic purchase. The review firm spent 2 weeks digging through the system. Their final report was direct and unsparing. The licensing infrastructure, described in the original acquisition documents as a non-critical backend utility, was, in reality, the operational core of every product Drayfield had purchased. Without active cooperation from the original architect, the system would continue to fail. Renewals would continue to stall. Clients would continue to leave. There was no short-term technical fix available. That report landed on Kyle's desk like a heavy object dropped from a great height. Drayfield filed a formal legal complaint against him the following week. The press covered it shortly after. Not a major story in the general news, but in technology industry circles, it spread quickly. Kyle's public profile, which he had spent years carefully polishing, began to change. The congratulations dried up. The questions started. Phone calls from his network went unreturned. The structure he had built his reputation on was beginning to crack under its own weight. Everything he had rushed to create was starting to come apart. Natalie had always been the one managing the story. She was skilled at it. She knew which journalists were friendly, which investors responded to confidence even when the facts were unclear, and which carefully chosen phrases could sound like strong leadership when nothing was actually under control. She had shaped the public image of Hayes Logic for years, including the version that had erased me from the company's story entirely. But there is a specific kind of pressure that even the most polished image management cannot hold back indefinitely. When Dreyfield's complaint became public, the investors who had supported Kyle started asking questions. Careful questions. The kind asked in quiet rooms that require real answers, not rehearsed ones. Natalie had pushed the liquidation deal hard. She had told Kyle the licensing system issue was manageable. She had called it a technical detail, something that could be handled after the money was secured. She had dismissed the one risk that turned out to matter most. Now she was the recognizable face behind a decision that had cost real people real money. Investors don't forgive that kind of mistake easily, especially when they feel they were reassured rather than informed. Kyle had years of genuine goodwill with some of those people. Natalie had only image. And image, when the facts finally turn against it, disappears faster than morning fog in strong sunlight. The message came on a Wednesday evening. Short. Sent from his personal number, not through his assistant's account. Dan, can we meet? Not about business. Just as brothers. I need to talk to you. Please. I held my phone for a long time after reading it. I thought about the boardroom, the parking lot, 29 years of early mornings and late nights, of difficult problems and harder arguments, of building something that hadn't existed before we built it together. I thought about the night we got our first real client. Kyle had called me at midnight, laughing, saying, Dan, it's actually working. People are actually paying for this. I remembered exactly how proud we had both been that night. I thought about Pete's phone call, about what he had told me, that Kyle had been drowning and had chosen panic over honesty, that he had chosen to erase me rather than admit he needed help. I thought about the voicemails, the offer, the silence that appeared whenever the word sorry should have been. Part of me wanted to say no and leave it there. But another part, the tired, quiet part that still remembered one shared apartment and 2 laptops, said I needed to go. Not to help him, not to forgive him, but because there was one thing I needed to say to his face. I typed back, Tuesday, 11 a.m., the coffee place on Clarkson. He was already there when I arrived. He looked different. I noticed at the moment I stepped through the door. Kyle had always been the kind of person who walked into a room like he expected it to arrange itself around him. Shoulders back, easy smile, eyes scanning for the right person to connect with. That version of my brother was completely gone. The man sitting at that small corner table looked tired, thinner than I remembered, older, even though only a few months had passed since the boardroom. He was holding his coffee cup with both hands, like he needed something solid to grip. I need your help, Dan, he said. No greeting. No small talk. Just that. I sat down across from him and looked at him for a long moment. This was the same man who had sat at the head of that table while a lawyer called me non-essential. The same man who had spent months building an exit strategy while I was still showing up every single day. The same man who had called me with a money offer like I was a contractor available for hire. Now he was asking me to save him. I let the silence sit between us. Not to be cruel. Not to punish him. Just honestly. I let it sit there long enough for both of us to feel the full weight of it. Then I said quietly, without raising my voice even slightly, "You didn't need me. Remember?" He closed his eyes. I didn't walk out of that coffee shop feeling like I had won something. I walked out feeling done. There is a difference. Winning has heat to it, a rush, a buzz. What I felt was quieter than that. It was the feeling of something finally finished. A chapter closed in its own time, not forced shut. A door swinging closed by itself without anyone pushing it. I had said what I needed to say. I hadn't tried to hurt him. I hadn't listed everything he had done wrong. I hadn't described what was coming. I had simply told him the truth, and then walked out into the morning air. In the weeks that followed, I moved forward with the steps Audrey and I had prepared carefully. As Dreyfield's position deteriorated and parts of the original Hayes Logic asset structure were placed back on the market at significantly reduced prices, I submitted a formal acquisition offer through Hayes Core for the core technical components, the parts that had always been most closely connected to my own infrastructure anyway. The price I offered was fair. Nobody else was bidding seriously. The serious buyers had already seen the technical review report. The acquisition was approved without complication. I now held full legal ownership of the complete system. The foundation Kyle had tried to sell without me. The thing his lawyers had described as non-essential. It was mine. Every last line of it. 8 months after the liquidation, Hayes Core has 10 signed clients. 3 are long-term accounts from Hayes Logic who followed me because they trusted the work, not the brand name. 4 came through referrals, people who heard from others that there was a company led by someone who genuinely understood what was underneath the system. 3 are new accounts I never would have reached if I had still been invisible at the back of someone else's operation. My name is on every contract. On the website. On the invoices. On the company door. Kyle sent me a message last week. Short. No greeting, no explanation attached to it. I wish I had done things differently. That was all he wrote. I read it twice. Once upon a time, a message like that would have opened something in me. It would have started a long conversation, or at least the hope of one. I would have written back carefully, weighing every word, searching his message for any trace of the brother I remembered from that small apartment in Denver. I'm not that person anymore. I closed the app. Not in anger. Not with bitterness sitting in my chest. Just in peace. Because for the first time in 30 years, I am building something that belongs entirely to me, and I don't need anyone's permission to keep going. Especially not his.